okay. I didn't list this as a rewrite, like some of them. More of a, I guess, roundup. um, I mean, people say they like horror movies, but then they are usually vague about what they mean. So I'll get into that. Sorry if I'm not wearing something spooky enough or get into costume for this one. True classic horror movies were typically monster movies, and so they follow a pretty typical dramatic, or not even necessarily action. I mean, there's increasing action usually, in the format, but they're not like there's no car chase scenes in Dracula, but there's a little bit of kind of action toward the beginning, and then Frankenstein, there's action at the end when the people are chasing him or whatever, but it's not the same kind of suspense. Like they always say like Jaws is actually a horror movie where you don't see the killer until the end, but then Jaws transitions from kind of a horror movie in spots to whatever. This would be a 3-hour video if we went into all of that. So obviously we have to pick our battles. So for a while, the monster movies kind of got supplanted by paranormal or supernatural movies, and these kind of go in and out of fashion. Like in the late '60s or whatever, in the early '70s, it was more like Rosemary's Baby and The Omen, Hound of Hell, I think. But then later we had similar premise, but not necessarily similar execution stuff like Blair Witch Project, which of course was shot on a shoestring budget, not a Hollywood big production or whatever. And there's been plenty of others, and then you had the whole time travel ones and the alternate reality ones and that kind of thing, where you think you're going to kind of see a fun romp, and instead it turns into this whole what have I done with my life existential crisis, or whatever. I don't know. But most of the monster movies are pretty boring by today's standards, unfortunately. Another discussion that would take a whole separate video. Attempts have been made, especially in the 90s, to update these originals such as Dracula and Frankenstein, but they failed to create, I would say, anywhere near as iconic images for the characters and and the settings and the like. You don't even have to have seen either of these two early films to recognize the monsters, and that goes for a bunch of other ones that get referenced. Like in a movie like Nightmare Before Christmas, the swamp creature shows up. What does a swamp creature have to do with Halloween? Not really anything, but he's there. Swamps exist in other parts of the year besides the holiday. Then the most common are obviously the low budget slasher movies, which to me really belong in a separate terror category. These didn't start, I don't think, with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but they all, again, have little to do with any traditional Halloween themes, even though there is one franchise called Halloween, right? I mean, I don't know that I ever saw all of the Halloween franchise movies. I used to see, I think it was the third one on TV a lot, and it had nothing to do with the other ones. It didn't have the famous guy, the Michael Myers or Jason. One of them's Michael and one's Jason. I forget, because I don't care for those movies. Just flat out, like they do nothing for me. And that one but that one was totally different. That one was about a radio station killing people with masks or something. It was even worse. It was just bad, painful bad. In the actual movie Psycho, I think only one person actually dies by violence in the film. It's not the usual guy chasing a bunch of teenagers around an old farmhouse. So it's kind of a twist on, start with 10 kids and eliminate them as you go kind of premise. I'll talk about that again in a minute. Nightmare on Elm Street was this kind of slasher terror movie, but the twist was the supernatural element because the villain was dead and could only access his victims in their dreams. Um, and so you had that like slight twist in their dream, and dream state is a separate kind of one similar to alternate reality. Um, that falls more into the creepy movies theme. There was a movie from the '80s, Dreamscape. That was a pretty good one. That started out with kind of comedy elements. I can't talk; my mouth is dry. And then turned horror a bit toward the end, but it had a somewhat creepy beginning, kind of a foreshadowing feeling at least. And then you had like nuclear war and things like War Games, which are kind of horror movies, but again, nothing, holiday themed here. I had tried to write a kind of a, I guess, typical slasher movie once, but I wasn't going to make it gruesome or gory, but it was going to have like a bunch of college students who get eliminated. And at some point, I had kind of abandoned that and tried to revamp it or use some of it for a different thing. And so I was trying to think of how to address the issue with the vanishing characters. And I guess most movies kind of narrow down the focus of characters over the course of time in telling of a thing anyway. Like most movies don't start with like The Breakfast Club where you have 5 teenagers and at the end you still have the same 5 teenagers. Like usually characters come and go, right? So I thought maybe one way to address this would be to have like a party toward the end and then these other characters can be there. They kind of did that at the end of When Harry Met Sally, right? Where we totally forgot about this other friend and now Sally's out with them instead of Jess and Marie or whatever. I don't know. Or in addition to, I should say. So yeah, if it's really noticeable that all of a sudden we've, lost a bunch of characters, maybe we show that everybody's there and we can see that they're all still around in people's lives if we have, turned a generic terror script into something else with no gory bits. So Nightmare Before Christmas, what was I saying? Swamp Thing, and I know that's kind of the beloved movie now. To me, that's more of almost a Christmas Eve movie. I don't necessarily think of it as a Halloween movie because, of course, it takes place starting the day after Halloween. That morning, we see the Halloween montage, and then we cut to November, really. And then the arc of the drama goes through to actually Christmas Day. So technically, that's a Christmas movie, but and it's the first time I saw it, I was kind of disoriented. It took me a while to kind of figure out which characters I was supposed to be rooting for or who some of them were supposed to be. I mean, you have this undead skeleton guy, and his love interest is a ragdoll chick. So instead of Frankenstein, but she's still created by a creepy weirdo. I guess creepy weirdos are Halloween now. But the actual bad guy is just too bad. He's just beyond the pale. He'll hurt Santa Claus. Like, you're not supposed to do that. And even though it's a holiday about Halloween, which is for children, for some reason there's children living in the Halloween town. Where are they real children? Where are they from? Whose children are they? Do they just represent children? I don't know. Maybe they're malevolent, they're nihilistic, they're untrustworthy, but somehow they don't reflect the overall attitude of the Pumpkin King or most of the misguided, but not mean, citizens of this town. So I don't know why these kids are so awful when, like I said, I didn't list this as a rewrite movie because, if I wanted to go through and nitpick Nightmare Before Christmas, this would be another 20-minute long addition to this video, so we can't really trying to keep it short for fun. But I think there should be like an alternate town, like a Samhain town, where there's like an actual Celtic Halloween place, instead of just the American, terror perversion of the original Celtic thing. Would that be too boring? I don't know. Like I said, other misplaced stuff, just like other terror movies uh, that aren't Halloween in the original sense. So yeah, hopefully you found that fairly disappointing and anticlimactic, because that's how I roll.